Our next session is with someone who I want to consider my friend, even if he may not consider it. No, but Jesse Hawk, aka Code Stacker, very phenomenal YouTube channel. His level of intellect when it comes to the JavaScript language is unlike any other. And to be completely honest, I've learned a lot from him. He's actually come in times of need of debugging issues for my own self. And so today he'll be talking about there's more to console than log. Jesse, without further ado, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Danny. I don't know if I'd go that far, but okay. Nobody told me that I was going to be following Kevin Powell either. I'm just glad that I'm not talking about CSS. I'm talking about JavaScript here. So awesome. So thank you again, Danny. Again, my name is Jesse. I'm a senior developer advocate at MongoDB. You might also know me from my YouTube channel, Code Stacker. But I'm going to be talking about debugging in JavaScript. And most of us, whether we should or we shouldn't, we use console log to debug. Now, I'm not going to say that that's the best way to debug, but there's better ways, but we all do it. So why not understand what the console is truly capable of? So did you know that there is more to console than just log? There's clear, info, debug, warn, error, dir, assert, count, time, group, table, and a few others. So very quickly, we're going to run through these. I'm going to give you examples of them. And hopefully you'll find some that you didn't know about, and they'll help you in your debugging in the future. And then at the end, I'm also going to show you an alternative way to debug inside VS Code that's quicker and more efficient. And so that is actually the end of my slides. The rest of this is going to be live coding. I like to learn by seeing things, and so that's what we're going to do. So let me just switch over here to VS Code. I have VS Code running, very simple index HTML. I have live server running on port 5500, and then I have that open over here on the side in Chrome, and I have the console open so that we can see everything as we go. So we have here x equals 1, console log x. I think we all know exactly what's going to happen here, so we're going to save that, and of course we get 1 logged in the console. So now what if we have more items? So let's say we have Y and Z. If we wanted to console log all 3 of these, we could say console log X, console log Y, console log Z. But instead of doing that, let's console log them all together. So we could have X, comma, Y, comma, Z, comma, right? And console log them all together. 1, 2, 3. That works. But if I'm just looking at the console, it's not very clear in the console what 1, 2, and 3 are. I don't know that they're X, Y, and Z. So we could also, manually type in here X, Y, and Z as strings. And, that's a lot of typing though, but that works. We have X, Y, and Z now in our console. But even easier, we're going to try something else here. We're going to just wrap X, Y, and Z with curly braces. So that turns these into an object, and by default, objects that are logged automatically log the key. So let's save that. Now we automatically have X, Y, and Z labeled on our 1, 2, and 3. So that's just a really quick and simple, easy way to identify what's in the console. And we can also use the same method with an object. So I've got this user object here, and let's log this. And it looks just fine. We have, the properties on our user object. But if I'm looking at the console directly, I'm not really sure what this object is. I'm not really sure that this is the user object. So again, we can just wrap this user with curly braces. And now it's very clear to me that this is the user object. And here are the properties within the user object. So nice little tricks here. So moving on, we're going to look at console clear. So if we can actually clear our console from our code and not have to come up here and manually clear our console. So if I save that, you're going to see, now I did have this console log user still, but then console clear ran. So this actually did log, but we cleared the console after that, and so nothing shows up in our console. If we were to then run console log on the user again, well, then it's going to come up. So anything after the clear is going to show up in our console. And so clear, if you're doing a lot of debugging, you want to just make sure that your console, you start with a fresh console every single time. Just throw clear at the top, and then that will help you out there. So let's move down here to the next part, which is variables. You can actually include variables in your console logs. So we have %s is %d years old, and %s is %d years old. So the percent refers to a variable, and the s specifically refers to a string. And so what this is going to do is it's going to look after this first argument, it's going to look at the next argument, which is a string, and it's going to take this argument and put it into our first string. And then %d, d is a digit, so it's going to look for the next argument, which is a digit. It's going to pull that into this first string. Same thing for this next %s, it's looking for the next string, and then %d is looking for the next digit. So if we run this, we're going to see Jesse is 29 years old and Bob is 50 years old. I wish that was the case, but it's not. We can add as many variables as we want into here. So if we wanted to add another variable, we could. But if we add something else after this, like maybe this is extra text, and save this, it's just going to tack on anything extra at the end, right? So pretty cool. Let's move on to the next thing, which is console log variations. So we have the good old console log, we have info, debug, warn, and error. So let's see what these look like. We have console log and console info. These both are considered informational, and so they look the same, console log and console info. The next one, though, is debug, and we don't even see that in the list here. So by default, debugging is not enabled, or the debug console log is not enabled. So we need to go here to the levels and enable verbose. And so now we'll see console debug. It shows up in blue. And then, of course, we have our warn and our error. Those show up letting us know that there's a warning, there's an error. And the cool thing about doing this is that we can differentiate all of our different logs, so that in our console, if we don't care about seeing the informational logs, then we can filter them out. If we don't care about seeing the warnings, we can filter those out. We only wanted to see the errors. So that makes debugging and seeing our errors or seeing our warnings much easier if we're using the proper log variations. Awesome. Let's set this back to the default and look at our next thing that we can do, console dir. I can't say that without smiling. Console dir. So we are going to pull an element from our DOM. So we have on our page here this H1, JavaScript debugging is fun, and we're getting that element, and we're going to just console log this element. So we get a nice HTML element console logged here. Now, what if we, instead of just doing a console log, what if we do a console dir? We get something completely different. We get the element here, but we get every single property on the element. So that is pretty interesting. If you ever want to see every property of an element, this is the way. All right, let's move on to the next one is assert. Console assert is really cool. It takes in two parameters. So right now I have is it working set to false. The first parameter is going to be a Boolean. It's going to be true or false. And if the assertion fails, so if this first argument is false, then this next piece is going to be logged. So this is the reason why it's not working. So let's save that. So we get assertion failed. This is the reason why it's not working. So if it fails, we get this log. If it's true, let's change this to true. We don't get anything. So really, this is like a conditional log. So if we wanted to say if something is false, then send the log. This is the way to go, and this is pretty cool. So let's now move on to the next method, which is count. We can count inside of our code. So I have just a basic for loop here. It's going to loop 10 times and call console count. So we get default 1 through 10. Now let's actually loop through twice and see what happens. So I've got another for loop, exact same thing. We're going to loop through twice. And so it just continues on. It goes from 1 to 20 now. So what if at some point we want to reset our counter? So we have this nice other function here, console count reset. Let's move that up in between these. And so now we're going to loop through and then reset and then loop through. And we're going to get a count of 1 through 10. And it's going to reset and then another count of 1 through 10. So we can alternatively as well name our counts, because maybe we want to count multiple things. So we can again loop through. We have console count, and we can name this count 1. And then on our reset, we do need to specify the label of which counter we want to reset, because we can have multiple counters counting different things. So look over here, it says default 1. And if we save this, now it's going to say count 1 and then the count number. So that's pretty cool. We can count different things throughout our code. And now besides counting, we can also time something, just like a stopwatch. So console.time actually doesn't do anything by itself. Well, technically it starts the timer, but it doesn't show you anything in the console, just like this. We have to do something with the time. We have to end it, or and we can, what I'm going to do here is use a set timeout to 5 seconds. And so after 5 seconds, we're going to call console time end. So let's see what happens there. We're going to wait 5 seconds. And then we should get a log of how long it took. So it took 5,004 milliseconds from the time we called time here to the time we called time end. Now, what if I want to check the time of my timer and not end it? Well, we can do that too. We have another set timeout here that's set to 2 seconds, and we're going to call time log. So this one is actually going to run first because it's set to 2 seconds, and then the 5 seconds. Save that, wait 2 seconds. Now we have the time log, and then after 5 seconds, we have the time end. So cool. Now, same as with the counter, we can add labels to these. We can have multiple timers set up timing different things. So cool. Let's move on to the next method. I'm going fast because there's a lot of things to cover, and I want to make sure I get them all in. So this one is console log. I am not in a group. So we can set up groups within our console logs if we want to keep certain things together. But we do that by using console group. So this log is in a group, and this one is in a group too. So let's save that. So we can see this first log is still not in a group. And then we've got this group here that we can toggle. Pretty cool. Now, what if I want to console log something after this group and I don't necessarily want it to be in this group? Well, we'll need to end the group, right? So there's console group end. So now this log after the group end will not be in that group. And there we go. I can also name this group. So by default, it just says console.group. So in this group right here, I could say awesome group, save that. And so now it's labeled in my console awesome group. And by default, this is expanded. So if I want it by default to be collapsed, instead of calling group, I'll call group collapsed. And then group collapse will just automatically show up collapsed, and you can expand it. That's the only difference. Now, the only thing different between the counter and the timer versus the groups is that we don't have to pass the label into the group end, because the group end automatically knows to end the previous group. So no need to label that. All right, moving on to the next method, we can actually perform a stack trace in our functions. So I have a very simple set of functions here. Function 1 calls function 2, function 2 calls function 3, and then function 3 calls console.trace. And then we started it all out by calling 1. All right, so let's log that, and we see our console trace from 3 to 2 to 1. So if we have a bunch of functions that are calling other functions and we're not sure what goes where, put a trace in and you'll figure out exactly what the hierarchy is. Cool. All right, let's move on to the next one. And this is actually my favorite, console table. So console table allows us to easily see data. So anytime you're working with an API, console table comes in very handy. So what I'm actually going to do real quick is I'm going to start up an API server that I have set up here, and I'll show you that code. It's very simple. It's just a really quick Node.js Express server, and all I'm doing is I'm calling a MongoDB database with our new data API. So basically, I just have this URL, and it's connecting to the database and pulling in my data. And so what I'll do here is I'm going to console log the data that this is returning. And we're going to get 16 documents. So this looks like, normal JavaScript is pulling in 16 products from a database. Depending on the way that your data is structured and what you're pulling in, this could be overwhelming trying to search through all of these things. So what if we change this from a log to a table? And save that. And I'll have to expand this a bit so that we can see the entire table. But now we have our data in a nice table. Now that's not all. Table also accepts a second argument. So we could put in here, let's say we just want the name columns. We can specify which columns we want to see. And so now we only see the name column. Pretty cool. Now at the bottom, we still have our array, our original array that we can still reference if we ever need to look at the other fields. We can also specify multiple columns. So let's say we want the name and the price field. Now we'll need to turn this into an array. So we're just going to surround that by square brackets and then save that. And now we can see our name and price right there in this nice little table. Pretty cool. All right, let's move on to the next one, which is styling. Did you know that you could add, now I am talking a little bit about CSS, I forgot about this. So you can add a little bit of CSS to your console logs. You just have to start out your string that you want to style with %C. C allows you to add CSS to the next argument. So the next argument here is, it's going to say color, it's going to make the text color red and the background color purple. So let's save that. And there we go. So this is red text on a purple background. Pretty cool. Now the next one is going to show us a badge, basically. So %C is on the first string here. So that means it's going to look at the second string for the CSS rules. Now we have a third one here, and this one's not styled. It doesn't have a %C. So it's just going to show up normal. But this gives us this nice little badge, this auth badge, and the user has logged in. So then we have another one very similar to that, which is basically letting us know, giving us the green light that GraphQL has received our data. And then one more here, we have an example of an error. Now this one stands out very good. This one we have a font weight of bold and a font size of 1 rem. We could even change this to whatever we want, make it 2 rem, and just make that error really stand out so that we know there is an error. All right, so let's comment these out. And next, what I want to do is show you how to easily debug inside VS Code. So we went through a lot of all of the console log methods, but there, we can easily do this right here inside VS Code as well. So I've been using Live Server running on port 5500. I'm going to keep doing that. And the only thing we need to do is go over here to the debug console and then run and debug. Pick which environment. I'm going to choose Chrome. And that automatically sets up this debug configuration for us. The only thing that we need to change is this localhost port number. Again, I'm running on port 5500. You enter whatever port you're running on, save that, and then we can start debugging. So let me uncomment this. So I have let name equal Jesse, and then I'm changing the name to Katie, and then I'm console logging the name. So let's set up some breakpoints. I'm going to just over here in the gutter, we can click on this and it's going to enable some breakpoints. So let's go ahead and hit the little play button here to run our debugger. And what's going to happen is it's going to pause on the first breakpoint. Now it's going to pop up the browser real quick, but it's going to go straight back to the code because we're not really worried about what's in the browser. We're worried about what's in our code. So what it's showing here is a bunch of variables. These are variables that we used in the past examples. So that's pretty cool. We might have a really big application that has a bunch of variables, but we don't have to worry about that because we can add whatever variables that we're concerned about to our watch list. So I'm looking at name. I'm going to add that, and then we're going to move on. And now it's Jesse, and now it's Katie. And so we're able to see what our variable values are at different points in time, which is really cool. And the last part, really quick, I'm going to show you is that we don't have to actually go to the console in the browser to see that the console log was actually logged. There's actually a console log that people don't even know about. It's right here in VS Code. It's called debug console. And there it is. Katie is logged in the console. Pretty cool.
Awesome.
Yeah.
To be completely honest, Jesse, you've had this chat on fire. The chat has been going nonstop. They love a lot of the techniques that you're doing. And I thought, with the last 5 minutes that we have here, if we can go answer a couple of these questions that they've kind of dropped in here, because there have been quite a few. Would you want any last moment to wrap up what you were kind of covering?
That was it. I was going to say, hit me up on Twitter. Let me know what you thought about this talk. How did you get something from it? I hope that it's going to help you debug faster and more efficiently in the future.
Love that. So one of the questions that we have here, since the overall topic is about debugging, Kato asked this question for Jesse. What tips for debugging in Node do you have where we don't have a browser, where we can use console.log in this situation?
Exactly what I went to at the end of this. The debug console in VS Code is the perfect and only way that I like to debug in Node because there is no browser. You can still console log in Node as well, but the debugging in VS Code, just people, it's just so easy just to throw a console log in there, and we all do it, no problem. But just use the debugger that's built in, and it makes your life so much easier.
I had to throw this comment up because I told people you were going to be amazing, and maybe some people doubted it, and now they know Danny was telling the truth.
I guess.
Okay, so is console.time, console.time_end, and console.time_log good for testing session timeouts?
It's good to, if you have a very expensive function, so a function that's doing a lot of stuff, and you really want to see how long these items are really taking you to try to refactor some code and make them quicker. That's what I like to use it for. So, do a timer on your code before you refactor, and then do a timer on your code after you refactor, and hopefully you shaved off some time.
Absolutely. And for y'all, I know some people are dropping comments. If you want to drop a question, now's the time. I'll try and bring it up. We have this question here. What's the difference between log and dir?
Yeah, so dir just goes deeper. It just, by default, log will only show you 2 levels deep on an object. Dir will show you everything. So that's really the main difference.
What is the best debugger package in NPM for Node, TypeScript, or JavaScript?
Well, so I don't know if they're talking about debugging or testing. Because really, debugging and testing kind of go hand in hand, but they are still different. Again, I would stick with the debugger inside VS Code. I think it works just great.
Does using more consoles really cause performance issues in real-world projects?
Well, hopefully you're not using consoles in production. Generally, you might have some that would show up if you have critical errors or something like that. But most of the time for debugging, you might throw a console log in there, but hopefully you're deleting it before you go back to production.
One question that I have, and this is actually kind of stemming from the JavaScript panel that we had earlier, what are some, and I know we have a lot of JavaScript developers, both beginner and advanced, but what are some things that you would think could be useful for a beginner to pay attention to with their JavaScript code? Maybe a tip that you have that can help them elevate their techniques or something to pay attention to?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when I was first learning JavaScript, I was putting everything all in one function and just overloading functions. So make your functions very simple. A function should only do one thing. If you find a function that is starting to get off and do other things, refactor it, make another function, call it outside, so that it's easier to maintain in the long run.
The last question we'll have, because I'm very curious about this myself, which one do you actually prefer? Do you prefer promises or async and await?
I like async await. I think it makes it so much cleaner. I'll go either way, but generally I'm gonna use async await.
Yeah, I'm on the exact same page as far as that's concerned. I'm a huge fan of async and await. By the way, y'all, number one, really, if you can, drop it in the chat. How incredible was Jesse Hall today? How incredible was CodeStacker? I mean, beyond even me, I'm taking a couple notes on the side. Like, I'm pretty good at debugging, but even I was like, okay, I probably should pay attention to XWiz. Number one, thank you so much for even taking the time out of your day to do this. I know you have an extremely busy schedule, and the fact that you were able to kind of fit us in means the world.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.